Could Six Flags St. Louis get a hypercoaster as early as 2027? If you had asked me this question like a month or two ago, I would have said probably not. I mean, I'd love that, but probably not. However, in light of recent events, like, just things getting canceled and this whole shakeup with corporate that's going on now and everything like that, I'm like, now I'm thinking more like maybe. Full disclosure, I kind of got the idea about this whole thing from another channel, Theme Park Brandon. He first talked about this idea on his channel, and I thought it was kind of intriguing that, like, Six Flags St. Louis could, in theory, get a hypercoaster around 2027. So, for those of you that don't know, I think most people probably know this at this point, but I'm sure there's people out there maybe that still don't. Six Flags America is closing at the end of 2025 here. And all the stuff in the park, there's kind of just a big question mark next to it, right? Are they going to scrap it? Probably most of it is going to get scrapped. Some of it might get sold, some of it might get moved. Most of the coasters, when I hear people talk about this, they say they're going to get scrapped. But one that is kind of in question is Superman Ride of Steel. It's a hyper coaster, and while it was built in 2000, it's still said to be pretty good. I think it's had some issues this year with trains on it and whatnot, but it's an Intamin. Same people that made like Millennium Force and stuff, and like everybody says, it's like an airtime machine that runs really, really fast, and it's just a nice ride. So there's a possibility this one could get moved to another Six Flags park. There's also a real possibility it could get sold to some park somewhere else in the world as well. And if the thing's just it's hard to take apart and they just can't do it, there's a possibility, I guess, it could just get scrapped. But people are kind of saying, well, maybe St. Louis could get this ride. And as I'm from St. Louis, I just wanted to make a little video about this. So let's get into this. Now, as exciting as the idea of Superman flying into St. Louis may be, it's not all airtime and easy wins, my friends. There are some serious barriers out there to making this move happen. First, the cost of relocation. Moving a massive steel coaster like Superman isn't cheap. We're talking millions of dollars just in disassembly, transport, reassembly. However, that is cheaper than building an entirely new hyper in the park, I will say that. And, before even kind of getting into those other costs, you got to think about things like infrastructure, right? They got to put in footers. They got to rewire electrical systems possibly, right? There's landscaping things they're going to have to do, okay? All of that stuff has an expense to it. Do they want to actually spend the money on that at all? I don't know. Six Flags does have a history of relocating rides, which we know about very well here in St. Louis. But it's usually smaller rides, flat rides, okay? Or it's done during better financial conditions. Right now, corporate seems to be trying to curb spending as much as possible, which we're seeing directly with, all these 2026 projects that don't seem to be happening. I mean, there was all kinds of announcements around this time last year saying, oh, we're going to be doing this in this park in 2026 and this park in 2027, and now things are getting delayed, or it's just crickets, right? They basically said we're going to do all this stuff in 2026, and it doesn't seem like those things are going to happen. The budget seems pretty tight at the moment. Are they going to want to move a roller coaster and spend potentially millions of dollars if the budget is that tight? I don't know. Another thing to take into account is the ride's age and its condition. Superman is 25 years old. It is still a fantastic ride, but moving older coasters does come with risks. You have things like metal fatigue. Is the track still going to align properly, right? Are there other issues that are just going to kind of pop up along the way as they disassemble and reassemble this thing? We don't know. And Six Flags absolutely has to consider, is the return on investment really there? Or is it better just to scrap this ride, maybe try to sell it to someone else? Whenever I mention St. Louis getting a hyper or a giga, a problem that people frequently want to bring up to me is the space and terrain of Six Flags St. Louis. I hear people all the time tell me, your park just can't support that kind of ride. You do not have the space for a ride like that. Superman does need a lot of flat, open space, and Six Flags St. Louis is built on hilly, wooded terrain. However, I do think this property has a lot of straight open space, okay? Especially if they can kind of move it into the parking lot to a certain extent. So the parking lot around this place is massive. Even on busy days, when the park is packed, it's only about a halfway, maybe a third of the way filled. The lot in front of Hurricane Harbor is huge and rarely used, and I think that would be a good fit if the ride station were to be placed maybe kind of around where Ninja is or around Skyscreamer. I've heard employees tell me that the forest that runs along that side of the park is part of their property, so this could provide a good path to the parking lot with properly done landscaping. I mean, the ride would need to run along the side of Hurricane Harbor there, but it could, in theory, get out to that parking lot if they could kind of get it in there and make it fit properly. There is a spot for RV and larger vehicle parking on this lot, but not a lot of people park there. I'm sure they could move that stuff somewhere else if need be. And honestly, that's a very, very small part of that parking lot. Behind that RV and larger vehicle parking, there's just this massive parking lot there that is literally overgrown with grass, kind of coming up between the cracks in the concrete. The park doesn't even take care of it because they just never use that space for anything. They just kind of let it sit there. So another idea, I'm not sure if the land the park owns goes all the way to West 5th Street, which is the road that runs right in front of the park. But if it does, that grass section that has like the big Six Flags sign on it, that could be another area to have the ride run through. I know one of Theme Park Brandon's ideas over on his channel was that maybe the ride station is somewhere around where Log Flume is right now. The ride itself would cross over the parking entrance and then kind of get into the parking lot that way. There's also a small park in this section, which I do believe is owned by Six Flags. I think it's part of their property. I see people eating lunch and walking through it all the time. Like, I was literally there earlier this week just recording B-roll for this video, and I saw Six Flags maintenance was cutting the grass in this park. So I would assume that's their property, right? I mean, I would think if they're cutting the grass there, the property probably belongs to them, all right? Maybe they just want it to look good, though. Who knows? Personally, I think Six Flags needs to take a page out of Over George's book, kind of like they did with Goliath. Have Ride of Steel come out into the parking lot. I know Goliath doesn't exactly come out into the parking lot, but it does extend out in front of the park. And I think we could do something very similar with Ride of Steel and making it work with our space here in St. Louis. I'm not sure how low to the ground Ride of Steel has to be, but it'd be pretty cool as you're like driving in, driving out to have this giant roller coaster like over your heads, right? As you're driving in and out of the park, like right there greeting you as you're coming in and as you're leaving, saying goodbye to you as you're going on out. I think that'd be really neat. So could be a good spot to put this hyper in our park. As we can see, kind of based on my ideas here and others' ideas, I think there is space for this ride to go in this park. While the dream is alive, the reality is probably a little more complicated. But hey, Six Flags has surprised us before, usually though in more negative ways, I feel like, than positives. But fingers crossed, maybe in this instance, they could surprise us in a very positive way here in St. Louis. I hope so, because I want a hyper in this park. We need one. I do have one other kind of interesting theory about this and kind of related to this that I want to touch on. And this is just, I mean, this whole video has been speculation, right? I'm just speculating out the yin yang here, all right? But I got one more bit of speculation to kind of get into. So here's what's going on. In 2027, CoasterCon 49 is coming to Six Flags St. Louis as well as Silver Dollar City from June 20th to the 25th. I don't know if it's going to be at like both locations during this time or if it's going to be like at one park for a couple days and then the other. I'm not sure how that works. I don't even know what CoasterCon is. I have no clue what that is. But the point here is it's not coming to Worlds of Fun. It's coming to Six Flags St. Louis. I think that alone kind of says something, right? That's kind of a statement right there, right? Why are you having it come here and not Worlds of Fun? Maybe there's a reason behind this. Maybe there's some kind of planning on the part of corporate with this, right? It could suggest Six Flags corporate sees potential in St. Louis. Maybe they even have some kind of plan related to this, right? That's that Superman Ride of Steel could be a part of. I mean, let's look at a few things, okay? We got Rookie Racer in recent years, and while I know that's not a big ride that drives a lot of people into the park, it is a much-needed family coaster to this park. Titan Track is getting put on the Boss, and I've heard a lot of naysayers out there being like, Titan Track hasn't done anything to the Boss. Baloney. Titan Track has done a lot to the Boss. It's just that it's only done stuff to the Boss in the parts where Titan Track is at, which is the first drop to the first straightaway. The second you go up that first turnaround hill, yeah, it's going to run like really rough because they haven't done anything to that track yet. But judge the Titan Track edition to purely the parts that it's on. That first drop and that first straightaway on the Boss is glass smooth right now. It is so flippin' good. I just rode it the other day. It's still really good, okay? And if they can add Titan Track to the rest of the Boss, it's going to make, I would hope, the rest of it feel that same way, where it's going to suddenly become this incredibly smooth and fast and powerful roller coaster that doesn't make you feel like, you got beat up by the time you get off of it. Okay. So I really do think that when Boss is covered in Titan Track, it's going to make it a very different ride. Okay. So let's combine those two things, right? The addition of Rookie Racer, the Titan Trek on the Boss. Now, with the idea of Superman Ride of Steel coming to this park and opening in 2027, I mean, imagine this. We have CoasterCon here in 2027. The headliner isn't just a refurbished Boss that's running amazingly, but the debut of Superman Ride of Steel, freshly relocated and running like new here at Six Flags St. Louis. It could also mark a turning point in how Six Flags views St. Louis, not just as a regional park, but maybe as like a national destination, okay, or at least a destination for here in the center of the country. So while nothing's confirmed, the timing of CoasterCon and when it's going to be here does kind of make you wonder, is Six Flags quietly setting the stage for a major comeback for St. Louis here in Missouri? I don't know, but I hope it is. I hope they are. I hope that's what the plan is. This is my hometown park, right? I mean, I'm always going to want good things for my park. I am completely biased for this park, okay? Because it is my hometown park. I've been going here since the 80s, and I love the place. It's great. So what do you think? Will Superman soar into Missouri, or is the coaster sadly heading for retirement? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe. All that stuff really does help me out a lot. All right, take care, friends. I will see you all later.